Good evening and welcome to the New York State Assembly District 15 Candidates Night, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. My name is Jessica Weaver, and I will serve as your moderator this evening. I represent the League of Women Voters, East Nassau, and I am not from this district. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The League of Women Voters aims to promote political responsibility through informed and active citizens in government. The League is nonpartisan and does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Throughout its history, the League has provided opportunities for candidates seeking public office to take their case directly to the voters. We hope that you find this forum informative. Here are the ground rules that the candidates have agreed to prior to the forum. Number one, the moderator will be a member of the League of Women Voters from outside the district. The moderator will pull straws or flip a coin to determine the order of speaking. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for an opening statement. After all the candidates have spoken, the moderator will open the meeting with questions from the audience, submitted electronically either before or during the forum. Electronic addresses for questions will be publicized with the forum and available on the League of Women Voters website. The moderator will instruct the audience to confine each question to the issues in the campaign and to take no more than 1 minute when asking a question. The moderator will be the arbiter of whether questions are appropriate, repetitive, or abusive. Questions may be addressed to a specific individual or to candidates in general, although all candidates will be given an opportunity to answer any question addressed to a specific individual. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer each question. At the moderator's discretion, time for a response may be reduced as long as it is the same for everyone. There will be no rebuttal. The moderator will attempt to rotate the order of speaking for each question. A League member will act as timekeeper. 1/2 minute from the end of any given period, the timekeeper will warn the speaker by prearranged signal. When the time is up, the speaker will be allowed to finish the sentence. Repeatedly speaking past the deadline may result in a candidate being muted. Candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement and will speak in the same order as the opening statement. Since the purpose of this meeting is to determine the candidate's views, no substitute speakers will be allowed to appear should a candidate be unable to attend. The use of props, charts, or visuals and the distribution of campaign literature is prohibited. In accordance with League policy, audio and video recording by authorized members of the media will be permitted only if agreed to by all of the candidates present. The League maintains the right to record the forum and publish it on League of Women Voters controlled electronic pages. No other recording will be allowed. No partial transcript or recording may be published without written permission from the League. Candidates, if you would turn your video on. Mr. Montesano? Thank you. Without further ado, we will begin with opening statements. According to the coin toss, Mr. Sackman, you are going first.
Thank you. My name is Joe Sackman. I'm a lifelong resident of Hicksville and running for New York State Assembly District 15 because I care about my community. I believe that we as a people can only thrive when we live in strong and healthy communities. When we know and trust our neighbors, when our leaders foster inclusiveness, not division. When both private and public investment supports education, health, and a local economy that works for all of us. I'm a professional researcher in veterinary medicine, and I believe in science and facts. I'm running for New York State Assembly because our District 15 community is in danger. For over a decade, my opponent has ignored serious threats to our public health and other threats to public safety. Instead, he regurgitates conspiracy theories and right-wing talking points. Like Trump, he promotes messages that only serve to divide and misinform the residents of our district. He wants us to ignore dangers to public health, although he celebrates every health issue as important. Similarly, he promotes theories and headlines about COVID and the pandemic that confuse and mislead. While New York was the epicenter of the pandemic, Mr. Montesano was spreading conspiracies about COVID, downplaying infection rates and supporting the failed policies of the Trump administration and the attacks by Mr. Trump made on the people of New York. I recognize the seriousness of the pandemic, understanding that the system was stressed, that as we face not only the greatest public health crisis of our time, we were also experiencing an economic crisis compared to the Great Depression. I stepped up and began to work to get food to families in need, PPE for healthcare and essential workers. I'm running because we are facing another crisis, cancer-causing chemicals in our water. For 10 years, 5 terms, Michael Montesano has known about this danger. He pays lip service about the Grumman plume, which spreads cancer-causing chemicals into our drinking water, some at 70 times allowable levels. I take the Grumman plume and groundwater contamination seriously. As a resident whose own water is contaminated with 1,4-dioxane and other cancer-causing chemicals, this issue directly affects me and my neighbors. I will seek to have the corporate interests that hid this illegal pollution pay for the cleanup, not District 15 taxpayers. I will work for all the people of District 15. I will work to bring us together to fight for what really endangers us, cancer-causing pollution, fear-mongering around COVID and other viruses. I will work for a recovery for COVID-19 that will allow us to fully open our schools and keep our students and staff safe. Let parents get back to work and protect and support all our essential workers and move us toward a strong and robust economic recovery. As District 15's representative in Albany, I want to be part of a government that serves my constituents, not just a few. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sackman. Mr. Montesano. Mr. Montesano, you're on mute.
Good evening. My name is Michael Montesano. I'm the Assemblyman for the 15th Assembly District, which runs from Bayville all the ways down south to Bethpage in the village of Farmingdale, with all the other neighborhoods in between. So in my 10 years in the legislature, I have delivered everything that my constituents have argued for. When we talk about COVID, the information that I provided to the public on a regular basis was that information provided to us from the governor's office from our daily briefings, especially as far as infection rates and hospital rates. We participated in securing $40 million in funds for additional PPE and other equipment for the hospitals. We went into session to vote on that at the request of the Commissioner of Health. As far as the Grumman plume is concerned, I co-sponsored a piece of legislation, Assembly Bill A 9492 from 2014-2016, to remediate the contamination at the Grumman plume, which that remediation is now underway. And taxpayers will not have to foot the bill because the state of New York was authorized to initiate lawsuits in federal court to recover the cost for that remediation from both Grumman and the United States Navy. As far as crime is concerned, I've always supported criminal initiatives for enforcement, increasing penalties. My opponent has called for defunding and reallocating police resources, and he promotes the bail reform that has given us so much criminal activity here on Long Island. I have participated continuously in every piece of legislation that has come through. I have introduced numerous pieces of legislation, 38 in total, and co-sponsored 513 pieces of legislation. I remain available to my constituents. I include all of my constituents and everything. I attend their functions, their rallies, their committee meetings. Everything that goes through my district, I attend. My office is 100% accessible to everyone. We answer every constituent's communications. We address their problems. During this COVID epidemic, we assisted hundreds of constituents in processing their unemployment claims and other insurance needs that they needed. And in fact, I called close to 100 constituents that were senior citizens and veterans to see if they needed anything as far as personal shopping, going to a doctor's appointment, and things of that nature. So as far as the work that I have done, I am proud of it. I'm always in contact with my community. I always support the legislation that best supports my district. I've been a 41-year resident of Glen Head since I've been living here, and have a family and grandchildren, so I know well aware of the effects that we need for education, we need for healthcare, and we need for criminal justice. Thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Montesano, you will be answering the first question. And the first question submitted is, what Nassau County and Long Island needs do you see as most distinctive and most urgent right now relative to the rest of the state?
Well, right now I see the big problem we have is recovering from the COVID in the sense of the economical downturn that has taken place in the county. We have small businesses that are in need of assistance to get back up on their feet again and to get running. We've petitioned the governor on a number of occasions and to open up some more businesses, which he's done recently with movie theaters, gyms, bowling alleys, restaurants. We're trying to get him to permit the catering halls to have a higher percentage of people so weddings could take place. We have the houses of worship up and running again in Nassau. But the biggest issue is the financial structure for a lot of these smaller businesses. Some of them may not be able to recover from this. So it's whatever incentives we could provide, whether it be financial, relaxing some rules and things of that nature. The second thing is we're very good with providing healthcare. We work with the providers to see what else that we could provide. We provide a lot of testing. There's regular testing going on a regular basis, and getting our schools fully up and running once again and doing what we can to assist them to get their schools up and running. I believe that children need to be attending school in person. It's the best for them, for their interaction, for their emotional well-being, and to get that in-person instruction, I think, is very important.
Mr. Sackman.
The immediate need is dealing with the pandemic. And that is without a doubt. This is the worst pandemic that we have known in recent history. And to do this, we're going to need someone who believes in science and facts, that follows those, that point of view on how to deal with the pandemic and how to have a proper recovery so that we don't go back to closing down everything. How someone who understands, and that's someone like myself, who has been a researcher for over 11 years, who understands what it means when we have a virus that's affecting thousands and well now over millions of people nationwide. And so this is the immediate need to deal with the pandemic, the recovery. We're still in the pandemic, so it's having to deal with that, and that if the numbers are going up, how we will deal with that. If we're going to make sure that we can recover and open up and have safe schools, so our kids and staff are there to work, to be there safely, then we're going to need someone like myself who knows and understands the science of this, and not running around spreading conspiracies about whether or not you should wear a mask.
Next question begins with you, Mr. Sackman. What are the biggest challenges in the district with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how would you address them?
The biggest challenges, I believe, for many of us is keeping to these behaviors that we've come to adapt, like wearing a mask, social distancing, not relaxing on those safety precautions. And because when we start to become comfortable and decide, well, maybe I don't need to wear a mask, or we can gather in large crowds, we may see an increase in numbers. And this is what the CDC has been saying: keep up with the social distancing, keep up with wearing the mask, washing your hands, and things like that. And I think that can become a challenge when we start to see the numbers going down. And New York has done a really good job at getting the numbers down and keeping them down. And so I think that can be the challenge that we're not really expecting, is that, oh, well, we're doing really good, so now we can relax. We don't have a vaccine yet, so we really need to continue that. And I can see that as the biggest challenge. Along, of course, economically, that's a huge challenge as well, and that's something that we have to deal with. But if we go backwards, we're going to close down again. So we have to make sure that we continue on this course so we can continue to move forward and open up as fully as possible.
Mr. Montesano.
Well, as I said before, to me, the economic redevelopment of our county is very essential and very important. And I will do whatever I can when we go back into session to participate in producing legislation and voting on legislation that will ease the burden on the smaller businesses, the medium-sized businesses, to get them up and running, to let them stay viable, to let them keep their employees so we could continue to reduce the unemployment as we have, especially on Long Island and more particular in Nassau County. And as far as educating the public and keeping them in mind what the recommendations are to stop the further spread of this virus, whether it be wearing, maintaining the social distancing, don't have any unnecessary large gatherings, right? And maintaining with the advices from the New York State Department of Health and Governor's Office regarding these events. The CDC changes its guidance on occasion, so we have to be mindful of that and see how we can get the people to comply with that and apply it. I think on Long Island, especially Nassau County, we've done extremely, extremely well in keeping our numbers at 1%, hospitalizations down, ICU cases down. And I think more importantly, the medical profession has gotten more of a handle on the treatment and diagnosis of this virus, and they're keeping the damage to a minimum by the new medicines. In fact, today the FDA just approved the new medication, Remisphere.
All right, Mr. Sackman, your next question is, what streams of income would you consider to close the state budget deficit?
With streams of income for the state deficit, we really need to move towards getting our economy back on its feet, and that is dealing with this pandemic. So to go in that direction, that's where we need to be. We need to be in a full recovery so we can make up this shortfall. Now, there are other alternatives that we can look into as per bringing in revenue, such as the ultra millionaires tax. It's a revenue source that we can look into. There's a peer-to-peer taxes, which are also, that's luxury home taxes. So there are other alternative forms of revenue that we can bring in that could bring in several $1 billion to cover that deficit. I'm also in favor of a public bank, which is a proposal for the future, which would stabilize our economy and bring reinvestment of revenue that if we had currently in this crisis, we wouldn't see such a deficit. It would have stabilized our economy and helped us through this.
Mr. Montesano.
As far as the streams of revenue, I'd like to first talk about what efficiencies we could obtain in government to bring our deficit down. Everybody always talks about how much more money we could raise and where we could raise it from. I'd like to talk about also how do we bring down, our cost. I think New York is very inefficient, how it spends its money, how it budgets its money, the one-time shots that the governor takes in the budget to raise temporary revenue, which doesn't go far, and puts us in a deficit. We walked into this pandemic with a $6 billion budget deficit, which is not the fault of any pandemic. It's the fault of poor planning on the governor's part with the budget. So when we look for revenue, how much more do we take from people? Right now, income tax is down, sales tax is down because of the pandemic, although those numbers have been increasing on a regular basis, according to the comptroller's regular reports. So we see that money increasing. I don't know where else we go. I'm not up for a payroll tax. I'm not up for increases in property tax, but I will tell you that they've already passed the commuter's tax that they're waiting to collect. So that's sitting out there. So I'm not one, and when you talk about the ultra millionaires, I will tell you this, 1% of our population already pays 50% of the tax revenue in this state. And that's who they refer to as the ultra millionaires. If you want to continue to take money from them and target them, all they need to do is pick up their laptop, move out of state, and there goes the tax money. So we need to consider this in our next session of what taxes we could handle.
Mr. Montesano, I'm just going to remind you that when the timer puts up the stop sign, that it's time to conclude your remarks.
Okay. All
right. The next question will begin with you, sir, and that is, what, if anything, would you do to address segregated housing in public schools in this district? What role should the New York State Legislature play in mitigating segregation?
Well, as far as housing is concerned, I believe a big investigation was conducted by Newsday hearings were held, and now legislation will be formulated this year as far as dealing with real estate brokers and salespeople regarding how they show people houses, how they speak about housing, what they should be talking about, what they shouldn't be talking about. And then there has to be harsh penalties, revocation of license, civil penalties, and the like for both the brokers and the companies they work for causing segregation. As far as segregation in education, school district boundary lines have been drawn many, many years ago when they formulated the districts. So if the state education department looks at what those boundaries are, they go by communities. So if you live in a certain community, you go to that certain school district. So they're not segregating against people that could come there. It's basically who moves into the community is entitled to go to that particular school if they live within that school district. So I think until such time that they think about how they control the size of a school district and who could attend and where the boundary lines are, that's going to be subject to some hearings and recommendations from the state education department.
Thank you. Mr. Sackman?
Redlining, as they call it here on Long Island, is definitely an issue that's been around for a long time. And that is that segregation that you bring up. The housing crisis that we're dealing with, the affordability, let's bring it back to public health, because this is a big issue for me. The communities of color that have suffered because of redlining suffered greater during this pandemic. So it goes beyond just housing and schools. It goes to how these communities have been affected by this pandemic as well. The higher rates of infection were found in communities of color. This is something that we have to address, because not only is racist policies wrong morally, it's killing people. And so we have to look at this system, and as has been said, yes, the Democrats in the Senate and others said, okay, we've got an issue in Long Island, let's work on it. There's a public health crisis here that we have to deal with, and racism within our society, within the system, is killing people in different ways. So this is a major issue that we have to look at and resolve.
Mr. Sackman, the next question is your question to begin with. There are many problems in our water supply: overpumping of the aquifer, groundwater pollution plumes, saltwater intrusion, and lack of recharge. The Department of Environmental Conservation is in charge of meeting our water needs, yet money and mandates seem not to have worked in the past. What specific things have you done or will you do to protect Long Island's water supply?
So Long Island's water has been used as a dumping ground for decades. I mean, the biggest, environmental catastrophe that we have is the Drummond Plume. It's a 2-mile wide, 4-mile long, 900-foot deep toxic lake that sits under 250,000 homes, starts within this district in Bethpage and goes south. It wasn't until recently, until pressure was put politically for anyone to do anything. And then the solution that they came up with something that's going to take 100 years. 100 years and at least $500 million to clean up. And it still grows. So we need to find better solutions. We need to look at newer technologies. But on top of that, there are alternative water sources that we could be looking at. That's New York City's water or the Pine Barrens Aquifer out east. This is untouched, clean water that we could bring into the district and other parts of Long Island that need this while we do the cleanup. So I'm very much in favor of investigating if this is the proper solution for us to have clean drinking water that's uncontaminated by doing that. There's a surplus for the New York City water. The infrastructure is there. We would just need to basically add some additional plumbing, as you could say, to make those connections. So I think that is a very feasible solution that we can bring to Long Island.
Mr. Montesano.
Hey, first of all, New York City has no water to spare. In fact, they're looking to connect to our water system to make up for the deficit that they have. So that's not a viable solution. I've worked over the last several years with the water district in Hicksville, Bethpage, Plainview, an old Bethpage in Plainview, dealing with the 1,4-dioxane issue, the nitrate issue, and everything else that's starting to surface, because the new testing mechanisms they have are turning up more contaminants. We've gotten budget money, grant money from the state for them to start building their infrastructure. Many of these filtering systems that are needed, the parts have been ordered to be put in place to assemble them, but there's only 2 or 3 companies in the country that manufacture these parts, and so it's slow in getting them. And some of the water districts have to build new buildings in order to contain these filtration systems. So we've passed legislation. In fact, we have 16 environmental bills that we've supported and voted on, and I voted on every one of them in the affirmative, to address the issue of throwing nitrates into our water supply. And a lot of it is the education of the public of what we put in to the sewage systems and the septic systems we have when it comes back to bother us 20, 30, 40 years later. So we have a lot of work to do yet. They've come out with some new septic systems, smart septic systems that can clean the wastewater more thoroughly before it gets into the ground, into the aquifer. These things merit more research, and we're going to need some more grant money to implement them because they're very expensive.
Mr. Montesano, the next question will begin with you. What is your plan to complete the revitalization of downtown Hicksville?
So we had received $10 million for the revitalization of downtown Hicksville, and that is the town of Oyster Bay received that. And I know they have many plans in the works and approval process, and that should not be confused with the Seritage development at Sears. That's totally a separate project. That's a private project. But with the revitalization, as many plans have been put forth to the community, and I think we need the collaboration between the residents in Hicksville and the town. And they've come up with some plans for additional parking, additional housing, walkable areas, a nice park set up down by the train station. And how do we get people to the stores with reducing traffic, whether it's with a trolley, a shuttle. And out of that housing that they're talking about is affordable housing, especially for our seniors and for our young people. So, and then, some of the infrastructure changes of, the facades of the buildings to make them more modern and attractive looking. So there's a lot going on in that regard. And we still have to get more of the collaboration from the public and some more approvals. And the town actually has to do that to move forward. And then the state DOT will adjust what the traffic and road situation will be.
Mr. Sackman.
Well, when I've attended the meetings for the revitalization and the traffic studies, a lot of the residents have been concerned about the increase of traffic in the area and how that will be handled. That seems to be one of the major issues that residents have brought up, especially since a lot of trucks go through Hicksville on 106, 107, and they're concerned that they will see an increase of that, and or they won't be able to get through Hicksville, depending upon how this revitalization goes. I am in favor of revitalizing this town. I live here. I've lived here all my life. I think it's a great place to live and raise a family. And so to see the plans that will come forward, I'd love to see what they're going to come up with, because that money came by several years ago and we don't seem to have any real answers yet. So I think this is something that we should see, and it would be great for Hicksville to have investment here, and I'm supportive of that. I brought up before, a public bank would be able to do a lot of this, where we could have the money that we need to invest in the community like Hicksville, and the revenue that comes back from stimulus to the local businesses would also help to decrease our taxes. So that's something that this would be a great example to talk about how the public bank could help a community like Hicksville.
Mr. Sackman, the next question will begin with you. Violence is everywhere. It is evident that it is no longer safe to be out at night in America's cities. How do we stop this violence from spreading to our communities?
Well, with a pandemic that we have, that does bring some destabilization, because there are people who have lost their job. Millions of people have lost their job. You find a situation where people are very stressed. And so you will, in times like this, in crisis like this, you will see an increase we'll say, some form of civic unrest. But as violence, from what I've read recently, the cities, etc., have not seen as much of an increase in violence as they're reporting. We've seen on social media, yes, there have been demonstrations and there have been those that have taken advantage of those situations. But I do think that we're doing a good job moving forward. People are coming back to feeling that, especially in New York, that we're handling this crisis and that we are becoming safer and that we're moving into a good direction because we're controlling the pandemic. Our numbers are down and people are feeling that, and people are getting back to work. So, we're moving in the right direction.
Mr. Montesano?
Thank you. There's no excuse because of a pandemic for people to go out and commit criminal acts against other people, robberies, burglaries, rapes, assaults. In fact, a few nights ago in the Hicksville, at the Broadway Mall, a family was accosted by someone and threatened. And so we have two components. One, we have mental health issues that people are not being treated for because our system has failed, that there's not adequate funding for mental health. In fact, the governor is looking to cut it again. And we have people out on the street that need to be taken care of. And then we have the bail reform. So there's no incentive for people anymore to abide by the law because should they get caught, they get taken into the police station and they're released immediately with a desk appearance ticket, or the next morning or the same day, depending on the time the crime occurred, they're released by a judge with no bail conditions. So it's a welcome invitation for the people to go out and do things. You cannot handcuff the police as to what the job they can do. And then you can't handcuff the judges and tell them they have to let people out without considering the totality of the circumstances of what they've done and their total record. So there's no excuse for the pandemic. Gives people a reason, pass to go out and commit crimes.
And the next question, Mr. Montesano, beginning with you. Is there any assistance the state can provide in assisting the local economy?
Well, what we try and do a lot of times is provide grants, as we've done, we did it in Farmingdale, Hicksville, Westbury with the development so what we do is for small businesses can apply for certain grants. The question right now we're confronted with is having the additional funds necessary to provide those grants and those funds. What we could do is relax some of the business operating rules and regulations, their permit fees that they pay every year, for fire inspections, sprinkler inspections and things of that nature, the franchise taxes. Maybe we could reduce the corporate taxes for a period of time to give them some more breathing room. We could spread out their unemployment insurance payments and the new additions that they're going to get because of the high unemployment rate that we've had in this state. So, everything else, is really regulated by, people going out shopping, people spending money. And the more we could reduce the unemployment rate and get people back to work, the more funds there is for people to spend. So the state is always open to look at different avenues of ways that we could assist the business. And we work with the chambers of commerce, for their recommendations on these issues also.
Mr. Sackman?
I'd like to point out that we wouldn't be in this situation if the federal government, especially the Trump administration, had handled this pandemic in the correct way. Instead of delaying and stopping us from receiving the aid that we needed, we wouldn't have we really probably wouldn't be here having to close down as we have and seeking to have to restore our economy. And it's because of support that Mr. Montesano provides the Trump administration in this way that we have this division within our community. And so we end up having the highest numbers in this pandemic. We end up having issues where we have to close down. And if we had leadership that really prevented this from happening and taking care of a situation like what we were facing in the very beginning and faced reality, I don't think we'd even have to be asking this question.
The next question begins with you, Mr. Sackman. Have you, your campaign, or any super PACs which support you accepted money and endorsements from anti-police groups? Are you for or against the defund the police movement?
No, we don't accept super PAC money. I'm a grassroots campaign, and all our money basically has come from people of the community, and we've had 1 or 2 union contributions, but no, we don't take super PAC money. And I believe in investment of the community. I think community comes first, and that you find safety from the community by developing it, strengthening it, and helping it grow by providing it the resources it needs. You'll see that a healthy community is a safe community, and I believe in supporting our community in that way. So that's where I stand with that. You know, we don't take corporate PAC money, and community first.
Thank you. Mr. Montesano?
As far as no, I mean, I don't support defunding the police. You know, my opponent was looking to defund the police, and he made such a statement back in August 13th of 2020 on YouTube when he came out with his candidate policy spotlight about defunding police, reallocating money, and he used the words defunding the police. So, and all his money, about over 90% of his political contributions come from the people in the city of New York, not him in his hometown. Very, very minimal, very, very minimal. And most of that money is from his family. So he has no regard for the law enforcement. And so he doesn't have to take union money to do that. It's his principle that to defund the police and reallocate money. And also he's a proponent of the bail reform. He doesn't think there's any problem with the bail reform policies. So, you know, that's his take. My take is bail reform needs to be adjusted. While we needed some types of bail reform because there were certain issues that had to be addressed, it was done haphazardly. And I support our police 100%. I think they do a phenomenal job. They need our support in every way, every which way we could give it to them.
The next question begins with you, Mr. Montesano. What specific things will you do to address the issues related to a possible second wave and surge in COVID cases? What role do you see the state Senate the state assembly playing to protect the New York state economy during the pandemic?
Well, I think we've learned a lot from what happened to us previously. And I think, you know, the shutdowns of certain businesses and things of that nature contributed to the economic problems that we have. And now that we have more of a handle on what this virus is about and how it can be treated and preventative measures we could take for its spreading, I think hopefully we will not have to go back to shutting businesses down, shutting schools down, and causing a disruption in the economy. And because when we do that, it's very, very hard to recover. People have been getting their unemployment and they're getting like $300 extra from the federal government now to help them. But that's only for, you know, a short fix. So now that we know more what we're dealing with, because in March we were caught off guard and not knowing what we're dealing with, I think we're going to address it better. More procedural steps can be taken should we get a full second wave, as some people are predicting in the winter. I think we know more how to handle it, how to do it. Our hospitals are more prepared, certainly. We have all equipment now in storage, ready to go. So I think we would be in better shape, and hopefully we can keep our economy more stable and level at that time.
Thank you. Mr. Sackman?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What specific things will you do to address the issues related to a possible second wave and surge in COVID cases? What role do you see the New York Assembly playing to protect New York State's economy during the pandemic?
Well, when elected, it would be my responsibility to make sure that we're making decisions that are based on science and facts and reality and what would be best for everyone within the community. And that means looking at, how did we handle it? Well, New York seems to have done a really good job with bringing the numbers down. What can we continue to do? How can we adapt? When we see a winter that's coming that is going to probably be maybe one of the worst winters, because if we do see an increase of COVID, we also have flu season upon us. You know, what is it we're going to need to do? What behaviors can we modify? You know, continue to wear masks, washing, sanitizing, etc. These are things that we put into place in New York. We've done a great job of promoting them and keeping them going. And so I think, you know, if we stay the course, we could avoid this. And then just as we are hopeful that we'll see a vaccine, that the New York State Assembly will be able to provide a way that that vaccine can be distributed through New York when it comes in, a safe vaccine that everyone would be able to take.
All right. Mr. Montesano, I'm sorry, Mr. Sackman, your next question is, how, in your view, can we make Nassau County more attractive and affordable for young adults?
That's a great question. Too many people I know and I hear of are leaving Nassau County, and that is because of the cost of living here. I was on a conversation with one young woman today, and that's something she's said she's been considering is leaving. So what we need to look at is how can we create living here that's affordable, and that is not just building affordable housing for young people, but also our seniors. It's something where they want to have a first-time home. So if we had something, if we promoted more of something like a land bank, where either a not-for-profit or a municipality had a land bank, and they could provide access to a first-time home at a low mortgage rate through a credit union or a community bank, possibly subsidize that to get a family into a home, help them start their life here. I think that's a really good way of going. We've got a lot of zombie homes on Long Island that we could be dealing with in this way. And that's in tandem, I bring this up again, the public bank. A public bank could help subsidize that and help that and bring back revenue in time to the municipality or the state through low interest mortgage rates through community banks and credit unions. So I think that's a way forward for us.
Mr. Montesano?
Well, right now we have the policies that my opponent just mentioned. There's always these first-time home borrowers, interest-free mortgage, different loans, no money down. They have many, many different projects that we run through nonprofit organizations to do that. And especially with the conversion of zombie homes and things of that nature. The biggest driver is you could give somebody a house for nothing here on Long Island. The problem is the cost of maintenance, the insurance cost, most especially and importantly, the real estate taxes. And on top of that, the school taxes that drive the price, the cost of insurance, maintenance, having things done. So in the village of Farmingdale and Westbury, with $10 million grant money we've gotten for both of those villages, they built affordable housing in the sense of apartments right by the train stations. They've done a phenomenal job. They've increased their Main Street population and businesses and stores and use, and they did what the young people wanted, walkable communities, which they have. And we're trying to accomplish some of that in Hicksville. But when you talk about affordable housing, it's what it costs to run a house. And some people are interested in maintaining and running a house, and some people would be happy with an apartment. But until we find a way of how we properly finance education, not on the backs of the real estate tax payers, it's going to be a difficult situation, because until you bring taxes and costs under control in this county, the houses are never affordable, even if you gave them away for nothing. But we do have programs for people.
Thank you. Mr. Montesano, the next question will begin with you. Do you believe a woman should be in charge of her own body and have safe legal access to abortion and birth control?
Well, I believe that women should have full control of their body. And as far as I know right now in this state and in this country, they have full access to whatever they need. And there was one last part of that question. Could you just repeat it about?
The question is, do you believe a woman should be in charge of her own body and health and have safe legal access to abortion and birth control?
And they have all that. So, so all those things are in place. We support them. They're part of the Supreme Court rulings, and it's part of New York state law.
Mr. Sackman?
Yes, fully I support that. I think woman's autonomy over her body is a right, and that there should be nothing to impede that. As long as she's not harming herself or others, it's in the sense of, like any person, if they deserve the right to as any person would over their body. So I support it.
Next question begins with you, Mr. Sackman. There's been an uptick in gun violence this year. What are you doing, or what would you do to ensure that our community is safe?
Well, gun violence is a public health crisis, and that we have to address it as such. So we would need to finally do some real studies about gun violence in this nation, and to understand that. And then we can move forward with how we can, write laws that would help us to deal with that. On top of that, education of how, for gun safety. I know many gun owners. I don't own one myself, but I have friends and neighbors that are hunters. A lot of them are, they're up on their knowledge about their guns and how to be safe, but there are those that aren't. And so I think a large part of this is gun safety, especially around children, and making sure that that anyone in the home that has a gun has the proper safety precautions there, understands what to do and how to be safe with firearms, and that we have common sense gun legislation.
Mr. Montesano?
I think, first of all, in New York, we have the most substantial gun legislation in the United States of America. We're very conservative. There are many laws in effect. Most importantly, we passed a law not too long ago called the Red Flag Bill. So now anyone in someone's household, in a school, a healthcare provider, police officer comes across anyone who's in possession of a firearm legally and appears to pose a danger to themselves or someone else, they could go into Supreme Court, get an order to have those guns taken away from the person, let a hearing be conducted for due process, and if a judge concurs that this person poses a risk to themselves or others, they can remove the firearms and the right for them to have a right to possess them. One of the problems we run into with firearm problems is the lack of cooperation from the other states. States do not share information with other states. They have people with mental health conditions that come here and able to get a firearm because they don't share that information for the registry that the firearms dealers have to check on. And they're more lenient with their gun laws. In some jurisdictions, there's hardly any laws at all. And so most of the firearms that find their way into New York and get people into problems are brought in from other states. But as far as our state is concerned, I think we have some of the most rigid laws in the United States.
All right. Mr. Montesano, the next question begins with you. What experience do you have that can show that you can work with members from other parties? How do you propose to engage and inform our community about critical issues and discussions in Albany?
Well, I think I have an excellent record in working across the aisle. All the bills that I've co-sponsored and the work I do in the committees with my colleagues to get legislation passed. I think I have a good reputation for that, in fact. And as far as getting the word out to my constituents, well, we have mailings that we send out during the year, newsletters, social media. I use quite a bit to get out, information on what we're doing and what's going on. Unfortunately, a lot of press releases that I issue, the local newspapers, because of monetary constraints or just their choice not to publish it, do not publish a lot of our letters to the editors or columns that we write. So, but as far as working across the aisle, a lot of the legislation we got passed, especially the Grumman legislation, was working across the aisle. All the environmental bills that we've passed. Everything that we do, we work across the aisle and have meetings, friendships, and we share ideas. And that's how a lot of this work gets done. And that's how a lot of the work got done to bring home to the district, as far as grants and different pieces of legislation and aid.
Mr. Sackman?
Well, for the last 5 years, I worked in campaign finance reform, and as such, that's a nonpartisan issue. So I have had many meetings with members of the State House dealing with this. So knowing that this is a nonpartisan issue, I know how important it is to deal with everyone that's up in Albany. So whether you're Republican, Democrat, I understand the need to work with everyone and making sure that we have laws that work for everyone. So I've had extensive experience doing this, not only in New York, but also in other states like Pennsylvania, Oregon, and Arizona. So understanding there are, many different perspectives that we have to consider when we're trying to get legislation passed and to do it. So again, as I said, it works for everybody. I do find it interesting that Mr. Montesano, is willing to work across the aisle, because many times what I've seen in social media, he's spouting conspiracies about Democrats trying to take out Trump with COVID-19 and things like that. So it casts doubt on his willingness to work with across the aisle. And I think most of the times it's because if he's to get anything get done, he has to work with the Democrats. Otherwise, he'll get nothing done. So.
Next question, we'll begin with you, Mr. Sackman. Do you believe in requiring vaccines? If so, how do you see balancing the rights of parents to do what is best for their children?
I believe in public health and safety, and that vaccines are important. A lot of vaccines that we recommend for schools, measles, mumps, rubella, etc., are things that are important and that we should have them. I don't think every vaccine should be mandated, but there are vaccines which like we wouldn't want to see polio come back. That would be horrible. So there are times where it would be important that we mandate it, but I think more importantly is that we have the communication with the community as to why we need a vaccine and have the education. I think we're educating the community about the needs for vaccines. Especially somebody who's worked in veterinary medicine. If your dog doesn't get his rabies vaccine, and they get rabies, they will die of it, and they could spread it even to other people. So I understand the importance that vaccines play within our society. So this is something that we can't take lightly, and I would promote as much public education, so we wouldn't have to pass a law saying you have to take this. But when we do, we will.
Thank you. Mr. Montesano?
Well, first of all, I think we've done, and we could always do more in education of parents about the vaccines, but I firmly believe a parent's choice about vaccines. And I have a problem in the fact that while there's a medical exemption, school nurses override the treating physician's recommendation that there's a medical exemption. I find that very hard to believe that the state education department is allowed to do that. Some people have religious beliefs that they don't want to have vaccines, but more importantly, if vaccines were that great for everybody and didn't pose problems, we wouldn't have the US vaccine court that pays the liability for all the tragedies and deaths that occur to individuals, especially children, for taking vaccines. And that's the only reason why these pharmaceutical companies promote them and produce them, is because they have no liability. And there are many tragic cases where vaccines have damaged children permanently and have taken their lives. So I think a parent and the physician of the child knows what's best for the child and how to treat them and how to take preventative measures that they won't get ill. But I certainly a big supporter of parental choice, and it's their child, they had them, and they should be able to raise them in the way that they see appropriate. I'm a big believer that public health is a big concern, but there's a way to approach it without infringing on parental rights.
Thank you. I have two more questions, and then we'll take closing statements. So Mr. Montesano, this question begins with you. I am concerned with charter schools. Do you support charter schools in light of the fact that funding for them come out of public school budgets that sorely need that funding source?
Well, charter schools on Long Island are far and few between, and where they have flourished is in areas where the public school system has failed the children. And so for that case, I would support them. I don't see them as a fix-all to replace public schools in general, because I think our public schools, especially here on Long Island, do a phenomenal job on educating our children. and many of our children are able to go on to college, etc. But there are a couple of communities where charter schools were warranted because the children were grossly neglected by the public school districts that were serving them. And I realize that some of that funding has to come out of those local schools and go into the charter schools. But I think in the cases where they exist, they're necessary and they're required.
Mr. Sackman.
I believe in fully funding public schools, and that this is in situations where we have charter schools. It is a for-profit school, and I've heard too many stories of where someone's child has been put into a charter school. The charter school decided, well, we don't want to teach this child for whatever reason. They send them back to the public school, but they receive the public funding, and then that money doesn't go back into the public school that the child has been reintroduced into. So now they have another child that they weren't expecting, and they don't have the money for. But the charter school has received that money, and they are not they're not giving it back. So our tax dollars are going to a charter school for not teaching a child. So I believe public schools are the solution, and that we can fully fund them and come, if there are issues, we shouldn't just hand it off to somebody else. Nancy DeVos would love to get rid of public schools entirely. I'm sure that's how she got a lot of her fortune, is through the charter school system. That's how she ended up paying her way into the position that she has as Secretary of Education under the Trump administration. And, so I can see how Mr. Montesano could be supportive of charter schools, because his party is supportive of that. And, I think it's a bad idea.
Last question, beginning with you, Mr. Sackman. What do you see as the most urgent issues facing your district?
Feels like the first question, because it is COVID-19. That is the predominant issue that we're dealing with. We're in a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, and so that, I think, is the major issue that we have. And so public health and it falls under that. So it is public health can be the umbrella issue for this. So whether it is the COVID-19 pandemic, the water quality here on Long Island, our segregation that we've spoken about in our communities, public health is a major issue that we need to address, because it does affect and intersect with these other situations. So that is, I think, the major issue that we are facing. And there's all these other issues we need to deal with, like I mentioned, whether it's the public schools, funding for that, whether it's recovery as we look forward to, the end of this pandemic, stabilizing and supporting our economy. These all intersect. And so there are many issues that we need to address, but it does come down to what's currently happening, and that is in the face of the reality of this pandemic.
Mr. Montesano?
So as it concerns the confines of my assembly district, I think the issues are the economy, affordable housing, and infrastructure. If we don't take care of and maintain our infrastructure, we have nowhere else to develop. Our roads, our bridges. We've been doing a lot of work, but we need much more funding to rehabilitate our roads and highway bridges. We're eliminating the railroad crossings to make them more safer, moving them from ground level to underneath so they pass as a tunnel. Of course, helping with the COVID-19 recovery is an absolute, and getting our small businesses and medium-sized businesses back up and running. And that's the way I see the issues as they're defined in my district. Healthcare is always a big issue, but I think we do a good job of it in this county and in this district in delivering healthcare. We have excellent hospitals and medical providers in the district. We also have Nassau County Medical Center, which does a phenomenal job in treating people with all kinds of issues. We have a lot of non-for-profit hospitals operating in the district, and we have the best of medical providers that you could find here in Nassau County and on Long Island. So, but those are the issues that I think are the ones that jump right out to us within the confines of the district.
Thank you. And that was our last question.
Okay.
So now we will have 2 minutes for closing statements, beginning with you, according to the coin toss, Mr. Sackman.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's forum, giving the candidates the opportunity to be heard by the community that serves to better our democracy by informing voters of their choices come Election Day. As someone who is a researcher, I understand and value science and facts. District 15 needs someone who makes decisions based on science and reality. The public health crisis we are facing today, COVID-19 and cancer-causing chemicals in our water, cannot be dismissed as conspiracy. Public health is a priority for me, and I believe the residents of District 15 deserve a representative who will fight for common sense solutions that work for all of us. This election, we must make a choice between democracy or a path that leads away from what the founding fathers intended for our republic. We should have a government and leaders that serve the people, especially during a crisis. My name is Joe Sackman, and I ask you to vote for me, and I'll be that servant that the people of District 15 deserve. Thank you.
Mr. Montesano.
First, I'd like to thank the league also for having us and for providing the, this virtual program so that people could see and hear us. So thank you very much. I know a lot of work goes into this. My opponent talks about conspiracies. I don't have any conspiracy theories. I just look at the conduct of government officials across the board to see their rationale for doing things and the outcomes. So when it comes to science, I'm a firm believer of it. I have an understanding of it. And COVID-19 is a real issue. It's just the way that we address it I have an issue with. The science about our water, I'm one of the biggest supporters of treating our water, providing the funding and working for legislation with the water districts that they're requesting to maintain our water supply and to improve it. Like I tell my constituents every year when I go out and speak at different forums, I work for you. You hire me every 2 years when you vote for me. I believe I've done a good job in these past 2 years in representing the needs and interests of the people of the 15th Assembly District. I've been very accessible. My office has been very accessible and providing a numerous amount of services to everyone that calls, and we get a job done. We work with other government agencies to get things done. We work for non-for-profits to get things done. I promote a lot of the non-for-profits. I participate in the food banks, having food drives, pet food drives, things of that nature. So basically, when it comes to this time of the year for the election, I tell the people, if you feel that I've done a good job and worked for your interests for these 2 years, you can renew my employment contract for another 2 years by voting for me on November the 3rd. And I'm Michael Montesano, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much to both candidates for participating in tonight's forum. We answered 17 questions on a wide range of topics, and we appreciate your willingness to make your views on those topics known to the viewers, the voters. You can both turn off your cameras now. Thank you again.
Hold on.
All right. So I have a couple of closing announcements. Of course, we want you to please remember that there are 3 ways to vote this year: by absentee ballot, by early voting October 24th through November 1st, and of course on Election Day. Check out vote411.org for the League's online voter guide and a bevy of information on voting, including personalized ballot and location of your polling place. Second, there's a program you should be aware of. Next Tuesday, October 27th at 7 p.m., the League of Women Voters, Port Washington, Manhasset presents Policing in the 21st Century, a panel of diverse perspectives answering your questions about what this could mean. 5 distinguished panelists with widely divergent experience and expertise will answer viewer questions and demonstrate the power of civil discourse on a topic of critical importance. Thank you for watching this Candidates Night. We hope you found it was informative. Good night.